Good afternoon, everyone. It has been a wonderful day. I'm really fortunate to have been able to see the panels that came before this one, and they were really relevant. So I'm really excited that we're the last panel to really think about some of the themes that were discussed earlier today. I'm Brandi Summers. I'm an associate professor at UC Berkeley in the geography department. I'm an Oakland native. My family is also from San Francisco and Louisiana, and so we just kind of made this trek over here, but I'm very familiar with the area and love this museum, so I'm happy to be back here. So I'm going to introduce this wonderful panel, and then, as I was saying a little bit earlier to Raquel and Bryant, that I had plans to talk about certain things or ask certain questions, but after watching the other panels, I've decided I'm not going to do that. So we're just going to, in a way, wing it, but also this is kind of my job. This is what I do anyway, so I'm looking forward to a good conversation with good people. So thank you, everyone. And also, we are going to make some time for questions, so have them prepared as you're listening. Okay, so we're going to start all the way to my far left with George McCalman. He is an artist and creative director. His studio, McCalman.co, designs brands for a range of cultural clientele. Additionally, he's a visual columnist for the San Francisco Chronicle, featured in Observed and First Person. His first book, Illustrated Black History, will be... as we're talking about publishing. So will be published this month? Yes, coming out in 2 weeks. Everyone get it?
2 weeks.
By Amistad Harper Collins. Let's give George a round of applause. Welcome. And then to George's right, we have Raquel Konte, who is a dynamic Chief of Design for Red Bay Coffee Roasters since 2014. And part of the founding team with her husband, Keba Konte. She is of Afro-Danish-born design. Is an Afro-Danish-born designer with 18 years of international design experience in the apparel and denim industry. Last as design director for Levi Strauss & Company in San Francisco. She is also owner and designer of her own brand, Owl & Wood, and co-owns and designs All Power to the People project with co-founder Frederica Newton. Let's give her a round of applause. And last but not least, we have Alice Grandoit-Šutka. She is a research-based designer, host, and publisher. Over the past 15 years, she has developed an expansive practice that is equal parts experimental, referential, and relational, existing at the intersections of art, community engagement, and food. Among these expressions, Alice is interested in building infrastructures for convening that open up our capacity to feel deeply and orient towards liberatory futures. She is co-founder and editorial director of Deem Journal, a media platform exploring design as a social practice, and a host at Tombo, a Copenhagen-based food practice where she instigates social and environmentally responsible hospitality. So again, round of applause for everyone. And so from what you can tell, they all have multiple jobs, do so much incredible work. So I want to start off, first of all, the last time I was actually here in this museum space was for a special event of a friend and colleague, Courtney Desiree Morris, where we were honoring the life of Bell Hooks. And so we were on different floors reading Bell Hooks' work. So I really have lately seen this as a space of mourning and commemoration. And actually also after listening to the storytelling panel and hearing Osayi's voicemail messages. I don't know if you were all here for that. So it made me think, because I lost my grandmother almost a year ago, and it'll be in November. And I also have voicemail messages that I can't delete. And so just in thinking about storytelling and also thinking about design as we design our lives, every day I wear a piece of jewelry or something from my grandma. So today it's a ring and also her belt. just to kind of remember her and really kind of have her think through me. And so I love the whole community over everything, as well as this deep form of connection that really exists in this space. So I'm just really grateful to be here for that. So I also want to spend some time on this panel to think about both personal and professional. I think they blend so much as it relates to design, but also going back to this concept of the porch, which is a design feature in a lot of ways, even if it's in that kind of in-between space, between inside and outside. And I want to go to a quote that I've used in my book from bell hooks. I basically just think and talk about bell hooks all the time, but the quote is about aesthetics, and aesthetics is something that I certainly think about when we kind of imagine design. So bell hooks said that aesthetics is more than a philosophy or a theory of art and beauty. It's a way of inhabiting space, a particular location, a way of looking and becoming. It is not organic. And so when she was talking about that, it was in relation to her seemingly growing up in an ugly house, and this concept that Black people don't know, recognize, or can't curate or cultivate beauty. And so she's taking kind of this idea, thinking about architecture, thinking about space, thinking about love, all the things that she wrote so beautifully about, and really turning it on its head. And I definitely think that as it relates to design, because it's not often enough that we hear about Black designers as creators and the worlds that they produce. And so I want to start off by asking each of you, how do you think of design, right? So we can have this big D design as a field, and then we can have a little d design in terms of the work that you do and the ways that you're really doing some world making. So I want to know, how do you think of design? Whoever wants to start.
Alice. Design, lowercase d design. I think a lot about design as a deeply relational activity. I think about design as a very diverse kind of process-oriented practice. And with Deem, in particular, a lot of the ways in which we frame up design is thinking about design as the kind of act of adding value. And also, in addition to that, if we're able to kind of open up a dialogue in that way, then we start to realize that design can also mean to kind of mark or plan or to problem solve, and also that everybody is likely participating in design regularly. I think that when we think about capital D design, it's a very exclusive field, and I think tends to kind of work in silos, and thus a lot of people feel like imposters or that they don't belong in these types of conversations. And so I think a lot of what we try to do is kind of open up the design discourse and also hopefully help people or bring to people's kind of awareness that there's a lot of agency with this in the space.
Thank you.
Design. Wow. It's a big question. I think for me, it definitely has to do. There's several things. It's part the culture that you bring with you, but as growing up, my dad was an artist. He was a painter, and I remember becoming a fashion designer and feeling kind of. I see design as a separate thing for me. Personally, design is different than being an artist. For me, I grew up with designing as a tool, an execution that has a lot of, how should we say, there's function. For me, there was function in it. There was always, it was never a singular thing where I would, maybe different than to art, but design was always with a group. There was always a group decision, a group need, especially working specifically for brands. You really is almost an interpreter and an executor of those needs, and sometimes you have to, you bring yourself to it, but you have to be very aware of the function and the needs for the end result, which I think is different than an artist. So I was always very comfortable that design had that elements to it, and not feeling that I needed to be also an artist. I'm okay being called a designer. So
Cool.
I could talk about this shit all day. To answer your question plainly, though, I don't see them as different. But it was an evolution to get to this point because I used to see them as separate things. And basically, school fucks you up. It allows you to think that something natural and organic, it becomes only academic and intellectual. And I think that's one of the great misnomers of design is that everyday people, think it is something else or something outside of their purview or something outside of an everyday conversation. And it becomes an elite conversation, and it's not. And so the journey of getting to a place of seeing them as separate things to being more, frankly, integrated is the difference between white and black. Basically white culture and black culture. And so I was trained in an institution. I'm a classically trained artist, and I'm a classically trained graphic designer, which means I spent money I didn't have for 5 years to put myself in debt to be able to throw a lot of phrases around that people think make me smarter than I am. And then when I started working for myself, I opened my own studio after being in the corporate world. I was in magazines. I was a magazine creative director for 15 years. And then I opened my own studio in 2011. And I basically have spent the last 11 years unlearning everything that I learned in school, which has brought me to this point, which is that there's no difference between how you are raised, the circumstances of your upbringing, and your view. That is something that we as Black people know, that we are products of our environment. We have a deep sensory view of the world that we think and feel, and we're always in our feelings as a people, and we are the most expressive people on earth. And so the coalescence of all of those attributes and aspects makes our perspective distinct and different than most of the people around us. And if you live in this country as a Black person, you feel crazy all the fucking time. But if you center yourself in your own experience, you learn that we are, frankly, when it comes to design, more evolved than what we are made to believe. And so in my practice, I was a graphic designer for a long time, and then 6 years ago, I started calling myself an artist. And I thought there were two separate things. And then now they're not different things. They're literally the same thing. And my philosophy is the same for both of them. I give myself room, I center myself in my own perspective, but I also do my research and my work. And so I'm able to articulate and communicate to the people that I work with, both my contemporaries and my clients, that there is an emotional aspect to design that we have to think about first before anything else. And we can get into the systems and the structures and the blah, da, 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 da. But at the end of the day, it is how you are feeling and what your philosophy is that is the start of any conversation around design.
Okay. Thank you all. And so
that's the short version of my answer.
Later, we'll have to talk about it all day, like you said. So there seems to be somewhat of a disagreement, right? This division between the artist and the designer. And I'm one who I feel like I can't do either, so I think they're the same. And in many ways, I think, thinking about aesthetics, I write about Black aesthetics, but more so Blackness as an aesthetic. And so understanding these ways that people presume that aesthetics and sometimes culture aren't as significant as what's happening in the economy or understanding politics, et cetera. And so I'm wondering if the three of you can talk about the importance of cultural perspective and what that means in terms of what you're producing. So not necessarily as it relates to publishing books, but perhaps it could include that. It could be around clothing. It could be digital versus kind of material spaces. What do you think is important about offering a cultural perspective? Or do you think it's really important to offer a cultural perspective? Especially if, like we learned in the last panel, you're putting everything out there for someone to judge, to litigate, to think through, to argue against, right? And so that means that, especially if you're putting out something, if it's not necessarily sonic, but if it's some visual stuffs, what cultural perspective, or do you believe the cultural perspective is really important for you to offer?
Yeah, I mean, I think I personally draw from, from my background, and sometimes it takes a while, kind of like George was saying, it can take a while to find out who you are. I also, I worked, corporate, so for many, many years, which you're right, you suppress kind of who you are to be able to execute. And as I ended up being on my own and being independent and basically working on my own stuff, I think it took me 3 years to kind of cut the umbilical cord, and then just starting to figure out who you are as a designer, what you bring to the table, and then be comfortable with that, because throughout a career or even like education, you are being kind of judged, or you being put a stamp on you on who you are, and it takes a while to maybe even be comfortable with that. And I think that goes to all processes. Also, how do you process your work? How do you execute it? What is your way of being inspired, and how does it come out, and what excites you about being a designer? So for me, I mean, my background, I'm African, I'm Danish. I grew up in Scandinavia with Scandinavian design as my foundation. So I know I'm bringing all those things, but I'm actually, it took me years to be comfortable with that and saying, this is the combination that I am. It's gonna come out in the way that it flows naturally through me, and it's gonna be this interesting combination. I have African roots. I grew up with white family and a black sister and friends that are from all over the world. Now I'm here surrounded with black people and black husband, black child, and my view of it, I still realize that a lot of it comes from a cultural perspective too, right? I didn't grow up here, so I have a different background, but I'm using both of it, and it's taken a while to be comfortable with it, but I'm proud of that combo, and I think it's important that we give ourselves that time to bring that to the table, because that's what makes it unique, right?
I guess in terms of my practice, I guess maybe I can backtrack a little bit. First and foremost, actually, a lot of my experiences are as a cultural arts organizer, most specifically in music. I found myself in a design space a little bit later on in my career. But I kind of bring that experience, I think, to the design space. And so I guess when knew one of my best friends and a co-founder in Deem, we started a design research studio, and in terms of the capital D design, the industry, we would be going into rooms where people were having a lot of really important conversations about how we were going to be existing in the future. And those rooms, every single one of them, predominantly white, predominantly men, who were kind of telling us exactly how things were going to go. And I think what we realized at the time, and this actually speaks to a point that somebody had made earlier about you're working in these spaces, you need to kind of bring data. And how do you think about making data through a very structured and reductive way of talking about people's lived experiences? And I think it was kind of then and there that we decided that, okay, we need to build our own evidence. And that's kind of how Deem came together. was us really thinking a little bit more about like what cultural perspectives are missing. And I think also maybe kind of flipping a bit of the question, because design really comes with this like solution-oriented attitude. Let me help you, let me help you, let me problem solve on your behalf using these fancy design frameworks. But I think actually one of the questions that we ask a lot is like, actually what can design learn from communities? How are people kind of intuitively organizing themselves? All of these kind of layers of knowledge I think exist culturally. And so there was just been a lot of space for us to think about that and highlight its significance. And I think I'll be explicit that the format that I really love publishing the most is magazines. It is my favorite because it allows for these pluralistic perspectives to kind of come together, coexist. Sometimes they could be significantly different, but the act of like holding that space is so important. And yeah, I just generally believe that culture is everything. It's like really crazy if we're not thinking through that lens for most of the work that we're doing, especially when we think about the deep kind of systems change that we're all trying to enact. You know, culture is a big part of the ecosystem of change.
Yeah, I agree with everything my co-panelists have said. There are two schools of thought about that. And you know, one is about metrics and data to form patterns of understanding. And the desire to have that is not, there's no malice in that. You know, it's researching to understand how human beings are engineered, how they operate, how they think, is a worthy endeavor. But design, as is the classic model of it, is really a one-way conversation. It's a one-sided conversation. And if you're factoring in culture and context, then it's a two-way conversation. You're actually seeking answers from the people that you're working with, as opposed to telling them what you think the answers should be. And you know, depending on where you are in the world, there's a dominant way of thinking. And even that in and of itself is cultural. It is a cultural perspective. And so my theory has been, even when I was in school, and I was the lone black kid in every class I was in, I'm used to being the only black person, which, you know, is why I started my studio. I was just tired of that shit. And I was just like, no, I don't feel like being the representative anymore. Yeah, and it sucks. It sucks for everybody. It sucks for the folks who are running the operation. It sucks for us mostly, because we always have the awareness that our coworkers don't. And I got tired of telling white people what they should already know. Yeah, yes, girl, yes. And so now I'm not exhausted. Not at all. And the kind of two-way conversation is much more expansive, it's much more interesting. It actually breeds creativity because everyone is thinking at a higher pitch, at a higher frequency. There are so many times I was in corporate meetings where you can feel how oppressive the thing is, and I heard that. I heard that. You all know it. We have all been there. If you aspire to any kind of standard in your life, you will know that feeling. And you know, I made a conscious decision years ago, you know, really when I started thinking of myself as an artist, that I wanted a majority of my clients to be black. And at the time, I didn't know if that was possible or not. You know, I work in the Bay Area and I live in San Francisco, so obviously that's not real. That's not a possibility. And then, you know, speaking it into creation, it just started organically happening. And now most of the people I work with are black. And it's not even a second thought, you know, that I have an all-black team, or that I'm leading an all-black team, or that the white people or other cultures are there to support either my vision or the client collaborators that I work with. And it just resets everything. It's a completely different conversation because black people just think more holistically about these things. And so you know, I just came back. I design a lot of cookbooks now, not because I'm a cookbook designer, but because I want to work with Black people. And so I just came back from a shoot that I was directing in New York with Yewande Komolafe, and we had an all-Black shoot team. And she was just like, can I put this in a bottle? Because I have to go back to rectangles for the New York Times, and I don't want to do that. Can I just be with us, who we all understand each other, and there's a cultural symmetry in the language that even though we all understand that we're very distinct people and we're all different, which confuses white people when we say that. You know, we have a diaspora, we speak similar cultural currency, but we're also really different, and we all know that about each other. And so I just think that we're getting to a place where we're transitioning out of this kind of binary way of thinking about it, that it's much more interesting to integrate these various constructs and see what comes of what's in the middle of that.
So I really appreciate all of your responses to that, and especially been thinking about how oftentimes design is seen as a solution to something, or the expectation that design is supposed to solve a problem. Same thing, you hear about that in architecture. And actually in thinking about something that Bryant was saying earlier about this presumption that you have to teach Black people how to eat, what to eat, rather than drawing on much longer historical traditions based in labor practices and all this other stuff, right? And so there's also kind of an emphasis on design justice. So that could be in reference to, you know, street planning or slow streets, or like, you know, beautifying spaces, right? But it's still supposed to be, honestly, Black folks solving a problem that we didn't create. And so I'm wondering if there's a way or how you think about the joy in producing something rather than the solution-oriented component that we're expected to have because we're solving racism for people who created it.
Was that a question?
It was. It was. Where's the joy? How do you where's the joy? I mean, where you're not necessarily trying to just solve problems. I mean, you have to make money, but at the same time, there has to be a space that you've created, right? And so I even think, you know, in terms of the all power for the people, right? It's like there's a way that you can commemorate the Black Panther Party. There's a way that you can identify and appreciate the art, the artistic value, the history. But also there's some joy in that. So it's not necessarily to sell bags and sweatshirts just because you're trying to solve racism. It's because actually I love wearing that sweatshirt, you know? So I want to know more about that particular kind of joy because it still goes into putting together these publications. It goes into selling, it's like selling mixtapes out your trunk. Like you still have to find the joy in producing that rather than trying to create equity constantly where the burden is placed on you. So I want to know, like, where do you find that in your design work? Because I know it's there, despite the fact that you might be hustling every day and trying to make it, but what elements of that are most joyful for you?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I think I discovered recently, I had just a little epiphany with myself, like what a part of the process that I like. And I realized that every time I start on a new project and I sit in front of the computer, I'm actually super excited. Maybe because it's kind of completely open and I have the full kind of like reins of where I want to start and the first kind of ideas that come. So to me, I realized I like that part of the process more than the later part of the process where maybe the project is done and it's almost there. And also as a fashion designer, I mean, we constantly have to move on to the next thing. So my almost 18 years in that corporate world where I had to constantly move on to the next season, I realized that I get restless really fast, so I'm looking forward to that next project and I'm ready to move on from that. So I think for my own personal thing that I just really love the start. Like opening up, maybe it's like worse for a writer where there is the blank page, but for me it's like, yay, okay. And then it's really exciting. So, and I think maybe also at that time, I don't think so much about, I just trust some inner thing that it's going to be cool. Even when you work for other people and you have to execute something for them, there can be a nerve-wracking thing about that. Like, is it going to be great? Is it going to be perfect? Is it going to sell? Is it going to be liked by other people? But I think in that beginning phase, there is a weird trust as a designer or artist, that you'll be able to get through it. And you will, with experience, you just know it's going to happen. But you don't know exactly what it's going to look like on the first stroke.
I just think that's baked into our DNA.
Yeah.
Is my simple answer. I just think we think more holistically because we're just always doing everybody else's shit. You know, we're always, even when we're working for ourselves, like we're used to just doing all the work ourselves. You know, it took me years of having my own studio where I was literally doing everything to learn that, oh, it's time for me to get an assistant, and oh, I could expand and I could have more people working with me and I could delegate. But even just that I felt that I had to do everything is a product of that. But the good part of that is that we do think more expansively. We're always thinking. You know, all of us are terrified of fucking up in front of our diaspora. We're all thinking about that all the time. We're always representing our community, even when we screw up. It's just like it's a way that we have been raised, and you know, I'm not American born, I'm an American citizen, but as an immigrant coming from the Caribbean, I was like, I did not want to tell my mother that there was loose talk about me on the streets, you know, because that's just not how that happens. And so always having a sense that we are representing people outside of ourselves, I think that's just who we are.
I love this question because I have a lot of joy that I want to talk about in relationship to making Deem. Okay, where do I start? So I think I try to find joy in every part of the process. And I guess maybe the theme around the consistent joy, the cycles of joy that I find myself experiencing in the making is I find joy in relationship. And it really starts because we're making a magazine that's usually quite thematic. It also gets to operate on a very different temporality because it's a slow media platform. It reads as a journal. Everything is quite long form. So I'm not in a rush to make things, which is kind of counter to a lot of the ways in which we're existing in the world. It's also, I think, the way that we work with the magazine is also kind of designed to hold one's attention, and hopefully it be something that you can kind of come back to. To be honest, I just kind of constantly a circle. So from the commissioning, which is always quite joyous because you get to kind of do a lot of outreach and build relationships with people. There's always a hesitance when we reach out to people to contribute, or if they would like to be a part of an issue that they don't know why anybody that owns a design publication is reaching out to them. And then it's really kind of a bit of a dialogue together to kind of maybe open one up to the possibilities of how design shows up in their practice or in their lives. Earlier, I guess another thing that I really love about making Deem is that nobody can tell me anything. I don't have to go to a big publisher and kind of ask for permission to do anything. In terms of how we edit, the editing is my favorite part because it's a very collaborative journey. So anybody that contributes to Deem has full transparency into what is going to show up. They have the opportunity to give us feedback, comments, because at the end of the day, there is this kind of responsibility of representation all the time, and it's not one that we take lightly, but it is this really wonderful kind of dance of sharing and building knowledge with each other and finding ways of collaborating around media making, which I realize is, I guess is very naive of me to think that everybody acts that way. Yeah. But being covered by, you know, publications and realizing like, oh wow, you didn't even think to fact check, or you didn't reach out to me to make sure that was accurate. And to maybe even be hurt by that, because there is just so much time that it takes to actually do that type of editorial. So I just kind of find joy in that. And then I guess at the end, which is kind of the beginning, I really love bringing all the text together and actually like understanding the relationship between the text. And it's something that's so special because in the beginning you never really know how things are going to emerge, or like if all these perspectives are really going to come together. But I think that kind of deep listening and reading and understanding how they speak with each other is quite beautiful. And then we put it out into the world, it takes a whole new life on its own. And so it's kind of just another cycle, a new beginning. And all of those things bring me a lot of joy.
Yeah, I want to add something too. There's something somebody said in regards to writing that is like kind of burying yourself, and there's this almost spiritual part. But I think, at least for me, there's also this magical part when you're a designer or an artist, that you are also bearing something out that you don't know how it's going to end. And every time, sometimes you get that surprise. You're like, damn, I'm good. And it is like a little magical. Sometimes there is the trust. You have to have this confidence that you can do it, but there is the fear and insecurities. And then every time you land it, right, and you're like, oh, okay, it's there, it's coming, it's always there, and it's kind of magical sometimes.
All the time.
Yeah,
magical all the time.
And I didn't answer that part of the question. Working with Black people, just that's it. Yeah. I really derive a deep pleasure from it, because the perspective it's always expansive. You know, we're always thinking culturally, always. And that is just, when you work with people who don't think that way, you recognize the absence. It's just a vacuum that's on all the time. And it's just sucking the air out of the room.
In a good way.
Yeah.
So it seems thematically, community, collaboration, and culture are those three important elements as it relates to your practice and your, I guess, dreaming and creating magic. So then I'm wondering, okay, then last question for me for now. On a practical level, so for those of us who are in the audience who might be producing some kind of piece of culture, again, whether that's a book, whether that is a piece of clothing, whether that's, I don't know, whatever, right? How does design go up against, and this is the question that kind of came at the last panel, but marketing, sending it out, like where, so you've talked about your joy, like when you know your shit is good, and so you recognize how important it is to really feel that connection. But then what happens when you actually have to distribute it, when you have to produce something for an audience, because we have no control what happens after it's gone out in public. And so yes, we get bad reviews potentially, but also we get lovely reviews for our things, and you want them to buy more and tell their friends and family, etc. But how do those two things, how does the design, that kind of creative component, go up against marketing, which, you know, some people in the corporate world think marketing's creative, but in a shade. Yes, but how do those two go together in a practical sense, especially if you're trying to get something out there?
I'm going to talk about this for a while, so if you guys want to go first, because my TED Talk is about to go. Come on.
Well, I mean, it all depends on, I'll let him do the creative part. I'm going to talk from a more, maybe a corporate. It depends. Somebody was saying, like, what is it that you want out of it? Yeah. And I remember when I was younger and I was in design school, and I was a little different. Both, I was the only Black, because I grew up in Denmark and I went to Danish School of Design, and I was the only Black person there. But I also was different in the way that my personality, I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. I like stuff being presented really finished and beautiful, and maybe like my version of it, right? I want that out. And at that time in my school, it was very more like flowing, and you should just kind of not, you should take all the feedback from everybody and not come with a finished product. And I was always struggling with that. But I also wanted, I saw myself as a designer who wants a lot of people to wear the clothing. I wanted it to get out. I didn't want to be the one designer and just have my own little place. I wanted everything out. So for me, working corporate was actually interesting. I loved the fact, and being schooled, I mean, I worked for Levi's, so it was very basic. You know, it's like, I actually enjoyed the restrictions. For me, is something that I enjoy. I love the basic of something that can last through time, and then fighting against basically the restrictions that you have. And that's not for everybody, but that's just my personal enjoyment. And maybe I got off the...
No.
Oh, okay. Good. So, yeah, I think, well, I'll let you.
We're saving the TED Talk for last. Earlier you referenced selling mixtapes out of the trunk, which is how I identify in life about everything, and actually is what I used to do in terms of working with musicians. I'll never forget when we were putting out Deem, my co-founder was like, so we didn't have a distributor at the time, and he was like, so how are we gonna get the magazine? I was like, we're gonna go to each shop. I was like, and go pull up and ask who is buying the magazines and ask to see them. Sometimes they'd give you an email, but I'd ask for somebody that was physically there and leave a copy. So I think there's this kind of like very much like all hands on deck, do what you need to do. But I also think that I've been maybe kind of thinking a lot about this question of like scale.
Yeah.
It's something that I kind of brush up against a lot and have a lot of resistance to, but maybe in recent times have thought a little bit about what scale means to me. And so to me, I think it's really more about like, what is the scale of relation, really? And in terms of marketing, what I think has become powerful for Deem is that nobody knows what we're working on until it's ready. And then then we're building a relationship in terms of moving the magazines. But I guess that kind of speaks to maybe having a bit of like a trust-based relationship and thinking about marketing maybe through that lens. Like, do you trust us to build a conversation that would be interesting enough for you to want to engage in? Do you trust us to arrive at an event with us and understand that everybody's gonna come with open minds and hearts? Like, so I think that a lot of it could be reoriented towards like an ethics of trust and relationship, which is something that I'm very interested in.
Okay, TED Talk.
So I'm going to give a case study. So this is my book. This is the book that comes out in 2 weeks. I wrote, designed, and illustrated this book.
Wow.
And I've been working on this book for starting the last original project was 6 years ago. I've been working on this book for 4 years. And it's been the thing that I have devoted my whole life and my whole practice to. It has become that. But when I tell you that I've been involved with every stage of this process, including I'm also overseeing, and I'm not, it's not hyperbole, I'm not collaborating, I'm overseeing the marketing and outreach of this book. It's being published by HarperCollins. They have remade their schedule, their process to work with me. And it's not something that they gave up, it's something I fought and fought for the first 3 years. It was a mostly shitty process making this book, behind the scenes. It was mostly filled with saga, drama, just one thing after another, all the time, every day, all the time. But I was always clear that I was never going to compromise with anyone about what my belief for this was going to be. So in relationship to the idea of marketing, I basically trusted myself before I trusted anyone else. And so the thing that I say to any person who is wondering, the questions that were asked about Bryant and the panelists before us were totally on the money. You know, you really have to trust yourself. You really have to dig in deep. And the idea that you can collaborate with people who have your best interests at heart, culturally, is totally a misnomer. It's not true. And so I tell people to just basically get their head out of the clouds. And for Black people, we don't have the luxury to trust publishers. And you shouldn't trust any publisher with anything that they say to you. And I'm not being an asshole, I'm being truthful. And the idea that you can think and dream and basically have that thing happen is real. But it takes a lot of fortitude, it takes a lot of curiosity. You have to ask and ask again. You have to double back. You have to assume that you're not being told the whole thing. And it's basically what we all know as Black people all the time. So what's incredible to me about publishing is that it does a whammy on you. You think, because of the romantic notion of publishing, that it is somehow different. You know, and Black people are always surprised that it's not. It's not different from anything else that you already know. It's not different. And so you have to have your wits about you, and when it comes to marketing, trusting the grassroots notion that this book, the entire making of this book behind the scenes was community. There are a lot of people involved in the making of this book that were just inside of my community, that I'd be like, am I crazy right now? I know the back end of this industry better than they do, and I feel like I'm crazy. And so, it was constantly people saying, nope, you're not crazy, keep going, keep going. I wrote a marketing manifesto for this international publisher 2 months ago, and I presented it to the 15-person team about how they were going to market and distribute and sell and put this book out into the world. And all those squares of white ladies afterwards, they all called me and they were like, thank you. I was like, I'm doing your job for you. And I have the energy to do it, and I have the fortitude to do it. I can talk about this shit all day long. And nobody's gonna tell me how this should live in the world because it's mine. I came up with it, it's my shit. And so nobody is going to send me over here or tell me, ooh, look, it's a bird, when I know it's a pigeon dead on the ground. And so the answer is, we really have to trust ourselves. We just have to trust ourselves. And it's okay that you don't know. That's the other part of it too, that people feel like there's this elusive language in publishing or elusive language in marketing. And that is absolutely not true. There have been systems of how marketing, design, distribution, all of those things, like having teams in place that are meant to help you is a wonderful thing. But culturally, they don't always align with what is true for each of us. And oftentimes you are asked to throw away what you know culturally to fit into the paradigm and the model. And I'm telling everyone, don't do it. Don't do it at all. Because your soul is going to be corrupted by the experience. You're not going to be happy with the process, and it's not going to produce the dividends that you want. You know, I have 27 years of publishing history. Nobody can tell me anything. But I had to unlearn and relearn a lot of things to do this thing. And it was a good education for me. I really had to, it was a humbling experience to basically have to start over several times. And I took it as an opportunity to learn. And I took it also as an opportunity to not be bitter about it. I could be sitting up here crusty right now. I could tell you all stories. But I feel great. I'm excited. I feel like I learned a lot. I feel like I have something that is a marker for this community. And most of the books that we come up with, let me just tell you a little secret. This book did not exist before I made it. When I tell you that even Black people are surprised that there's no book about our history that you can just buy and gift to other people. Even we don't know that. This book was a pioneer. This book is a pioneer. I made something because I was looking around. I was like, oh, this actually does not even exist. And everyone around me is being super breezy and casual about this. And I'm the only person who is feeling the rage right now. And so it's really like our ideas, as you were talking about the sorority, it's like, yeah, that's a new book. We are all making new things. And you might think that, oh, someone else has done it or someone white has done it. And what your perspective is brand new and it needs to be in the world. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Peace out.
Welcome to George's TED Talk.
Yes, welcome.
So we're gonna open it up for questions. Do you have the mic? Anyone have any questions for this wonderful panel? We're burnt out.
Yeah, it's also okay. It's like, I get it. It's been a long day. Just saying.
I'm still on this question from my panel leader. What are you guys reading now? And you like that? And what design books, I love design books and art books, should be in the world right now? Or listening to audiobooks. I listen to a lot of audiobooks.
Wow, I think I don't have, I mean, the way I operate is really more visually, and it's interesting, even when I work in the industry, I really kind of disdain going to big stores or reading magazines or having subscriptions of magazines. So I think I'm more of a visual person. I take in everywhere I am. I see things. I take pictures all the time, and I have my own little collection of just visuals. So it's less about one perfect book or one perfect person that I admire. It's really more about my own stash of stuff that I pull out. And it's a constant, and people, especially my daughter, look at my phone and be like, you have 25,000 pictures on your phone. But it's like, it's a collection of things that come slowly. And when I feel like I need maybe inspiration, it comes like this weird flow. I will look at things and then things will stick, and that will give me this little clue that, oh, this is what's happening right now. This is the direction, but I don't really seek it out. It is kind of just a natural part of the way I operate. So, so I don't have a special book or a special name or anything. It's just a flow of things but I am a collector. I have lots of little things everywhere that inspires me.
Right now, I am reading, probably as a way to process some grief around the loss of bell hooks. I am reading Belonging, A Culture of Place, which maybe gives a bit of a hint of something that we might be covering on the next issue of Deem. Also, because we're in the middle of closing, I'm also not trying to read too many things beyond the texts that are with us right now. But I also really love podcasts. Yeah, I think particularly because I live abroad, the types of conversations I probably want to be having more regularly kind of exist in my headphones. And so I am a student of Adrienne Marie Brown. And I love the Emergent Strategy Ideation Institute podcast. It's just full of very generous conversations. And yeah, those are kind of the things that I'm reading. And what do I think there needs to be more of? I think more of everything. Like I remember some people were like, oh, other people are going to start magazines. Will you be upset? I'm like, no, I won't be mad. I think everybody should, like, if you feel called to this crazy calling of publishing, like, by all means, we should be doing it. I think, I'm just trying to think, what do I want to read more of? I think I want to learn more about the practice of embodiment, but I'm not sure if that really needs to be text-based. So that's kind of where I'm at.
When you're a designer, it's one of the few industries where you can be a sanctioned hoarder. it means that you're just always collecting things. I read a lot, but there's no one thing I'm reading. I'm kind of like my grandmother. There are several books around the house that I'm reading at all times. And, but I'm always collecting things. And the main tool that I use is my brain. My brain captures a lot of imagery. And because I've been doing this for so long, there is just a natural reflex where my brain is always putting together words and images in different formats at all times. And I'm also a reporter, and so I am that nerd who is at an event with a notebook. You know, I'm a columnist for the Chronicle, and I've had a visual column, and what that means is I go to events and I draw the people that I see. And that, for me, has done a lot to kind of recontextualize this idea of cultural journalism. You know, when we go out, it's the whole community we're with. We're listening to snippets of conversations. We're putting together, you know, bits of gossip. We're throwing some shade. You know, there's a lot of things that are happening at all times, and so I'm constantly pulling and kind of in my little basket that I'm just always kind of, and then I will take out, and I have ideas for things that, you know, I'm working on this cookbook that I referenced earlier, and the cover is going to be quite interesting because it's type that I made for myself 8 years ago, an idea that I had. When as I was working on the cover, I realized complemented the art on the cover. And then I presented it to Yewande, and she said, "That looks like my handwriting. That's perfect." And I was like, oh, I wouldn't have known. I was just going by instinct and trust. And that theme has come up a lot in our, you know, you really have to build a belief in yourself, often at odds with your surrounding location. And so it's just building that, you know, whether it's ephemeral bits or, you know, a sense of faith and trust in yourself, all of those things are collections. And you can pull from them, and it's like your own personal archive that you can kind of fall back on and pick up when necessary.
Other questions? Oh, yeah.
Thank you, guys. This has been great to listen to. I wonder, maybe with the theme that we've been talking about of community over everything, specifically for San Francisco, where have you found that community? I feel the thing that's been mentioned a lot of the person you're expected to be in work culture has zero awareness of the person you are at home or anything that's going on outside of that company's walls. And so all the more important to feel like you have some direct connection to what's going to give you life outside that can come from community. Where are those places for you guys?
I mean, I think for me, it's I have a lot of friends from way back and all the way up till now. So I would say for me, you talked about relationships and your community that helped you. I have a lot of, just strong, creative people that I reach out to. We reach out to each other. And I think it's really important if anyone is starting out in the industry or starting out as a designer or artist, that create a relationship is just so important, and to keep relationship from way back. I have friends that I've known for 20 years or 25 years, and we, even though if you don't see them for 2 years, but you're able to pick up the phone or, so I think just having that kind of trusted group of community and friends is really important throughout your journey, and especially people who have maybe known you all the way through. So it is like that with everything in life, but for me, definitely, I have a strong kind of group around me that I bounce off ideas, and they also, you know, sometimes need my advice. So I would definitely give that advice, like keep your connections from way back all the way to now or future.
My response will not be San Francisco specific because I don't live here. But I can say actually in the past couple of years, because I live abroad, I've had to actually think about that a little bit more critically, especially as somebody that had moved to a new country and a new city as the pandemic was beginning. There's maybe two approaches. I think one is that I do have a community of people that are maybe first and foremost built off of like personal relationships and shared interests. And I've thought a lot about like how do I continue to care for those relationships, and I think we've had to get creative because I haven't been able to see most of the people that I love for 2.5 years up until this summer. So we had to get creative about how we stay in touch, how we stay in relationship with each other, how we build intimacy with each other. So sometimes that would mean that a lot of my life was on Zoom, actually. And we would do really interesting activities with each other, things that we couldn't do in person. We would maybe do them online across very crazy time zones. In addition to that, I had one other thing, but I'm very jet-lagged, so I'm hoping it didn't escape me. There was a two-prong question, or two-prong, yeah. So that was one thing, to kind of build and maintain the relationships that you have and care for them and nurture them. And then I also have this other approach of like, if there's somebody that I'm interested in speaking with, or somebody that I think could be interesting to connect with in some way, shape, or form, I have a zero shame in like the cold email, actually. I mentor some young creative women in Copenhagen, and I always kind of push this as like, if you take the time to compose a message to somebody that is thoughtful, I think more often than not, you will get a response. And it's something that I advocate for, even when emails find me, that I see that somebody took the time to think through what they wanted to share with me, then I'm always kind of open for, a line of conversation or a way to connect.
12 years ago, a friend and I started a Black collective that we call the Black Brunch Club, or BBC for short. And it is probably the main reason I'm still in San Francisco, that I could stay living comfortably in San Francisco, that even though I have a lot of friends and I am out socially a lot, majority of my friends in San Francisco are Black. And settling that within myself is basically how it has given me solace. I mean, those are the people that actually helped me with this. It's a whole network. It's like 150 people at this point. Yes, there are that many Black people living in San Francisco. And a lot of folks are East Bay too. But we are deeply committed to each other. We know that it's high stakes out here. And it's not something that, if you live in Brooklyn, this is not something you have to worry about. But if you live in San Francisco, you actually have to embody the desire, because the reality can sweep you away, and it can make you not want to live here. And so having that option for me is frankly why I've been able to be grounded living here. I love San Francisco, and I'm not leaving. So just having that community, which I treat as a very precious thing, has really allowed me to aim for very high heights living here, and to not sweat what a lot of people have to face on a daily basis.
Can I respond to that, actually? I have a love-hate relationship with San Francisco. I do not like San Francisco. I like places in San Francisco. I like people in San Francisco. But unfortunately, I know too much about its history, and so I have a lot of reservations about it. And like I said, my family came from Louisiana, and then my mom was born here, her siblings were born here. And so I think one thing in terms of, I do believe in community over everything. What I also know is that it's not easy sometimes to build community. And actually in California, it's really hard to build community if you're not from here. And so even if you are from here, it's difficult sometimes to do it. So part of it is being able to find people that you can be yourself with, which I think so often it's like we have to create a self in order to attract other people, but then that means you're not attracting your community. And so, I'm a geographer, so I have to think about place-based elements, but I think so much of it does have to do with place, brunch, right? It can be in a place, it could be meeting somewhere. But I think unfortunately, because we have prioritized digital space as a thing, and unfortunately for someone like you, that is really important. However, if you are in the same location, texting does not communicate in the same kind of way that talking to someone, seeing someone does provide for you. So it's possible for me to not have a loathe-hate relationship with San Francisco if I kind of build spaces and people. Hey, George.
Roll through. The next one is in 2 weeks.
I'm coming with my child. But as it relates to having to cultivate place, I had to make my home in Oakland again. So I had to build a sanctuary for myself and then invite people over. And so when people came over, they said they don't want to leave. And that's exactly how you build the community. You build a space that you love. You go to a space that you love, and then you invite people to come and share it with you. So I don't know if at the location in San Francisco, but I think it's something that can be built. Are we done? Okay. We went over again.
Actually, I just have one more thing to say about this. Yes. Get into it. Bryant and I are going to be back at Moad in a few weeks. A weekend of Litquake, talking specifically about this book. Bryant is actually inside this book. He's one of the essayists. And he talks about his love of Edna Lewis and Black history. And so we've known each other for a long time, and we are dear friends. And so this is, it's deeply meaningful for us to be in conversation. So what I'm saying is roll through.
Thank you,
Saturday
everyone,
afternoon.
for staying this late. Thank you.
I just want to give the details. That's going to be Saturday, October 8th at, I think, 6:30 p.m. So please do come back for that. And thank you all so much for this really beautiful panel, for staying here. Our work is not done, though. You've had all these people that have been telling you about their work, and it's time for us to talk back about what we've learned and where we're going to take what we've learned. And Bryant, it's you.
Powerful, provocative, beautiful, moving. Today has been so much more than I could have ever imagined. And I have to say, I sit in deep gratitude for you all being here, because this is the longest I've been in a public space in like 2 years. So thank you for coming out. Look, we wanted to have space just to hear any feedback, to potentially hear about ideas for forthcoming summits, because it's my idea that this will be the first of many. Although I'm the outgoing chef in residence, we are hoping to bring someone on in the new year who will take my place. I'm not gonna lie, I'm tired and I'm just ready to get downstairs and drink and eat. So I will leave this up. I'll like, by show of hands, if anybody feels very strongly that they want to continue talking, I can do it. But honestly, I'm just ready to just like let my hair down, go downstairs, hear some tunes being spun by DJ Max Champ, have some delicious food, which will be prepared by Chef Lala Harrison. By the way, is Yvette still here? Okay. Anyway, Chef Lala's mother, Yvette, has been a major supporter of this event through her work at Kaiser. And then what else? Oh, drinks provided by Jessica Moncada, Konte, Keba, and Raquel's daughter. So we about to do it big downstairs. However, if you want to continue talking, I'll pull up a chair. I'll get in the rocking chair.
Until 5.
Oh, we have to keep it? Okay. So I'm supposed to keep you in here for another 20 minutes, but you know. Okay, with that grown, I think it's clear that we need to wrap this up. However, I want to invite people to mingle in here. I'm going to put on some Gangstar. The second floor is open. Check out the new exhibition, and then we will see you downstairs. And if you're feeling ravenous, we have some pastries in the back. So Thank y'all. And for those who are coming tomorrow, we're about to be at the farm in Pescadero. Tomorrow's about just living our best life. We have the nap minister, Trisha Hersey, who's going to be leading us in a collective nap. We'll have like contemplative writing. We'll have equine activities, gardening, and we're going to have a fabulous community dinner that's put together by some of the Bay Area's most amazing and brilliant chefs. And I don't know if he's still in here, but my brother, Kev Choice, who's such a gift to all of us in the Bay Area, one of the most brilliant musicians I know. We actually went to college together. He's going to be putting on a fabulous performance, taking us through the arc of black music. So if you're not going to be there tomorrow, come back next year to the ranch. But if you will, we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you all for coming out to the first day of the Black Food Summit. Okay.